What's up? Welcome back to Stoke Sessions. We're on season 2, episode 5. Today I've got the founding fathers of Magnetic, Mr. Etienne Bruwer and Dave Korinek. Etienne's joining us from our office in South Africa. Dave is joining us remotely from the office in Texas. And super excited to get super excited to get into it today with these guys. We're going to be talking about brand strategy, some of the fundamentals of brand strategy, and in kind of a preview of the chat with Dave and Etienne here, we've talked through the basics and kind of like taking brand strategies, stripping out a lot of the new buzzwords that have come about in the last few years, 5-10 years, and really getting back to the basics. We're going to go deep on this one. So grab a coffee, grab a drink, enjoy the show. Let's get into it. Etienne, I'll let you go ahead and get us kicked off on kind of the overarching message that we're trying to put through today, and then let's get into some tactical stuff here.
Yeah, thanks, Mal. So there's been a lot of chatter of late, in industry with clients. Definitely a lot of influence from social media, and everyone's an influencer nowadays, talking about how everything within the branding world has changed. So there's a sentiment and there's a drive that things within the brand development space has changed because of how fast people are changing and how fast trends are changing. But I think the reason why I was keen on talking about today's topic is because I'd like to address that sort of myth specifically, if I can call it a myth, because the truth behind it is a lot hasn't changed. Actually, who we are as consumers, what moves us, what motivates us, that stuff hasn't changed drastically over the last several years. In fact, it takes a hell of a long time for those things to be influenced. As a human species, it's taken 2 million years. We've evolved. Like a lot of the basic instincts we got from the hunter-gatherer sort of phase of our lives are still intrinsic to who we are. Just what we look for has changed, and what we care about has changed slightly, and trends and have little micro influences, but the fundamentals are still very much what it was way back then. If you think about the big brands like Nike and Google and Apple, all of these giant brands, that they built themselves on the same fundamentals that is still true for who they are today. I think,
Right.
yes, messaging adopts, but a lot of the fundamentals are actually still very relevant. The structure of how brands build are still very much the same. The human truths, that's how I like to think of it, is still highly relevant today. Probably more so than whenever before, because the competitive landscape's become so competitive. It's become so tough. Everyone's competing anywhere in the world. So if anything's changed, it's that you need to take branding a lot more seriously than what you've ever done before.
For sure.
Because you're no longer competing just to the people in your region. You're now competing against the whole world.
And all the fakers out there, right? People that think they can stand up a brand and make it successful overnight, or kind of fake it until you make it type deal. It's funny because when you mention big brands like Apple, Google, Nike, they've done some simple things, but they've done them extremely well, and oversimplified them to lean into those truths that you're talking about. It's always cool to see, but yeah, in the rise of, the recent rise of social media and the information overload, it's interesting to see a lot of these brands come up. People, we had another talk recently, Dave, talking about the flash in the pan concept of brands that kind of pop up and then pop out, and the brands that really make it and stand the test of time have done a few simple things really, really well. So I'm excited to unpack those today. Let's get into it.
Yeah, Matt, I love what you just said, what flash in the pan as an example, but I think that's a key difference is if you want to build something to stand the test of time, you actually have to build it on a solid foundation. And I think what a lot of brands are doing, with very high risk, is they're building brands based on trends. So they go and they build a brand based on a current trend, a consumer shift or a trend. And that's what I'm talking about when I'm saying things haven't changed a lot, because those trends change quickly. Why would you build a brand that you want to have last for centuries on a trend? It just doesn't make sense. So I think that's a big part of where my sentiment comes from, is exactly that. Don't build it on a trend, build it on human truths, things that are
If you
part of
think,
our evolution, that's going to be part of it a long time. Sorry, Dave, go ahead.
no, I'm just going to add to that. I mean, you mentioned the word, which is always the key to me, and I'm a big analogy guy, as you know about me, right? So I like to make simple analogies. The way that we build houses is still the same. Structurally, you build houses very similar. You may use different materials. The trends of how the houses look, the type of style they apply changes over time. But foundationally, how you build a house, how you build a skyscraper to last for 50 years, it has not, again, they've only been getting more, strengthening the core of how they do it, but it's still the same process, right? And I think that's really what we're talking about here is, you don't just suddenly go like, well, let's just go throw this, building together some new way that nobody's ever tried before on the sand and the beach, and it's probably going to fall over. And that is really it. In order to really build something that's of value for time and for the longevity of what it is, you really need to put a firm foundation in place for it.
So, boys, how do we do that? Let's break it down. Let's get tactical on this one.
Yeah, yeah. Ooh, tactical, tactical.
Uh,
I'll start a
I've,
little bit. I think really quick. I think there's a few key things here to focus on, and there's a lot of different ways to say this, and it's been said a lot of different ways over the years. But realistically, there's a couple of key things that need to happen for brands to really truly kind of lock down that unique selling proposition and who they are, to really know what they're all about. They have to really understand who they are, what they're all about. They have to understand what their competitors are doing and saying about themselves, and how are they different from them. And then they have to know what intrinsically is interesting about this company, product, service, or brand to the person you're trying to sell it to the customer. And I mean, ATM, we've broken it down into what we call relevance, differentiation, ownability. Again, it's been said a lot of different ways over the years, but ultimately what we're trying to do is define those key metrics in order to build something of value that we can keep going back to and make sure that that we're hitting on the mark. Those are the foundational items that haven't changed. It's like red, white, and blue, or RGB. Like, it's like you gotta go to the base of something to build off of it. And again, things can kind of build off of that, and we do build on top of that foundation quite a bit. And it is also influenced by trends depending on the time, how we sell to people. But at the core of what it is, that sweet spot of what a brand is and needs to define, are those three main things.
yeah, look, the question your brand needs to answer are based on, you need to find the simple truths, right? So what Dave just mentioned, relevance, differentiation, ownability, it's something that we build, the brands that we engage with and the brands that we build, and we've been part of some long-term, very successful stories over the year. We'll tell a few of them towards the end of today's podcast. It's the same methodology that a lot of brand strategists globally use, which is purpose, position, personality. But we've put a spin on it, which sort of makes you understand that it's about the human truth that you need to find. That's why we've renamed it to relevance, differentiation, and ability. Because if you think purpose, which is in our terminology relevance, you need to understand that it's about why does what you do matter to the consumer, to the end user. If you disconnect purpose from, it doesn't help you to find a purpose that doesn't matter to the consumer. If it just matters to you, right, why would you build a brand based on that? So there has to be some type of, you have to find the relevance in the purpose and then articulate and position accordingly. Differentiation is the same. So it's about, yes, it's about positioning, but it's not enough just to position with what you think. You need to consider how you're going to stand out, right? That's why we think about it as differentiation. And then ownability, this whole construct of, people want to belong, building tribes. Again, that's based off personality. So, people want to relate to who you are. So you need to, but we also take it a bit further into, you need to be able to live that. You need to be able
Yeah.
to actually build it into your culture of your brand. Brand strategy extends so much further than, it's no longer just marketing,
Mm.
right? It has to be infused into your business making decisions for it to be real. And again, that's what the really big brands, the guys we spoke about earlier, do so well, is they picked they did the purpose, position, personality, or relevance, differentiation, ownability sequence well. They put in a lot of effort to really understand who they need to be and why it matters and how to stand out and be different. And then they went and they built that into the DNA of their organizations. They made it part of how they make business decisions. They really invested into it, and look at where they are now. Fast forward 10 years, 15 years.
Let me
Some of the
add to
biggest
that.
brands
Simon
in the world.
Sinek.
Yeah,
Yeah,
let me
yeah.
add to that really quick.
Hmm.
I think you said a word. I think we say this a lot. Sometimes we take it for granted. But what you're basically saying is really important here is we need to teach brands how to humanize themselves, right? DNA is something about a living and breathing element, something that we have. It's the soul. It's our personality. It's like what makes us who we are. And I think a lot of times when people have built brands, and you were just kind of getting into that, where the Simon Sinek concept of the golden circle, right, is like that, this concept that we want to build on why the company or brand matters, not just what it is and how it does it, right? When you do that, you take out the personality, you take out the soul of what it is. When we look at building brands, it's about creating human connection, right? It's about finding a way to make this brand part of someone's household, part of their, just things that they talk about. It's not about an inanimate object, right? Good brands find a way to become humanized, become real in people's lives. And when they do that well, they create long-standing relationships with customers and consumers all over the world. I mean, I think that's what I ultimately look at is like, if we can't do that for a brand, then why do it, right? Because that is where you get these flash in the pans, or these good services can come and go, but like friendships are harder to unravel. Do you know what I mean? Like there's this point about where you build friendships, you build relationships, and those have their goods, ups and downs, but it's a relationship. So I think that's the big thing for me.
So let's get into a little bit purpose from a purpose perspective. How obviously I've been doing this with you guys for a long time, right? MAG is running up on 20 years here, so trying to be sensitive to anyone that's listening right now that might not have gone through this 3-step process before. Let's get into purpose a little bit, though. Finding your purpose. That's traditionally one of those things where some people know it to begin with, but the majority don't. If there's a brand out there that's looking to get into purpose definition, get into that first step of the 3-phase process, what are the things that they can do? What are some actionable tips on how to start extracting that from your business, your brand, your company, even yourself, right? Dave, you're talking a lot about how brand is really this humanized element that we have to extract out and really build upon. That's what gives it the longevity and helps to stand the test of time. With purpose, what are some of the things that we can suggest out there that help people to start lean into that, help to start extract that out and start to externalize that into their audience, their customer base in the market?
So I'll take the start of this one, Etienne. You can build on it. So for us, we've basically kind of coined that. We took the Simon Sinek model of the, start with why, understand who you are, and then just define the how and the what. And what we've basically coined, that new version of that to us, is called True North. And what we're doing is we're always seeking True North, the why, the purpose behind a business. And our longitude and latitude to get there are really the how and the what, right? They all build on each other. But you want to start with that first concept of why, or what's our true north? What are we trying to achieve every day? And so I'm going to read you just a couple of samples from some current brands. And Etienne, you kind of went out a couple, Apple and whatnot. Let me just read a couple of them to you and just say, hey, does that do I feel that every day in the type of service or product they provide? So Starbucks, for instance, their why is to inspire and nurture the human spirit, one person, one cup at a time, one neighborhood at a time. So they deliver on that. Their goal is to make that, they become an iconic brand in every neighborhood that they're in. People walk around with this Starbucks cup and feel good about themselves. You know what I mean? I mean, obviously there's the haters that want, just local and then never go big, but these guys people that buy Starbucks, I see my wife carrying around a Starbucks and she's just so happy that she's got a Starbucks in her hand, but because it's something bigger than just a cup of coffee, right? It's just a cup of coffee, but that's how they built this brand, right? Coca-Cola is to refresh the world, inspire moments of optimism and happiness, create value, and make a difference. So they've had many campaigns, and you see it again. Good brands they start with this kind of true north in their brand, and then they work it out, and you see it come to life in their campaigns, in the content they create. It's a constant theme that they're on top of all the time. And then Airbnb is another good one, which is to help create a world where people can belong anywhere. And Basically, that's what they do. So just some samples of brands I think that are doing that and they're living that and breathing it in everything that they do. But it's like they've established their purpose and everything they do works backwards off of that. And that's when a good brand does really good things, is when they focus on that first, versus like Airbnb. We rent properties. Like there's nothing like that's just so like it's so
Yeah.
not connected. It's just something, right? I rake lawns. Whatever. I feed people. It's a something, but there's no feeling to it. It's like the idea of, like I want to serve you the best plate of food, right? That I can. And I think we've done this a lot with some of our brands. We tell them the idea that, food with a story or something with a story tastes better. And this idea that like, when you talk about a recipe and you just give them the recipe, like, here's how you make this thing. It's just, potatoes, this, that, you put it in the oven, 350, it comes out. It's great. If you say, this is my grandmother's recipe, they've been making it for generations, and the way that you whip the potatoes and this all means something, and how you do it, the flavors the way that you kind of create that story around that recipe and that food you serve just makes it taste better. That's what branding really comes down to, is we've got to do all of that to make these brands taste good, look good, sound good in the eyes of the consumer.
1,000%. Etienne, do you have anything you want to add on to the purpose part?
So much, but I'll start with something that to me is
just start with why.
Sort of
start with why.
a big I'll start with why. No, for me, something that I've learned, that because purpose, because it's such a widely used term, a lot of brands talk about purpose, and Simon Sinek did such a great job of taking the construct and explaining why it actually matters. So he put the data behind it so that people understand. But what I still feel people often miss is the real value behind why purpose is important. Like they get it because this guy wrote a book about it and it's a big hot topic and you need to have a purpose behind you, but that's not enough. You actually need to understand the psychological mechanic behind it so that you find the right thing that makes sense for the company that you're busy building. So look, the original human societies 2 million years ago was hunter-gatherers, right? That's who we were. That's how you survived. You had your role, and what you needed at the time was completely dictating what your focus was. So if it was season to gather food, then that would be what the entire day was sort of dedicated towards. And over millennia, our instincts were developed, right? And our fundamental biology was influenced. Evolution of the human species didn't happen over 10 years or 15 years. It took millions of years. And those instincts, if you understand the human instinct of fight or flight, that came from our hunter-gatherer time, but still real today. Even today, when you get a fright, you get that reaction of, what do it's your brain telling your body, this is something out of the ordinary. I need to react to this right now. Hunter-gathering instincts are still relevant within us as humans today. You need to resonate that what you're looking for, that you want to associate with, that you want to affiliate with, has to matter to you. If it's not something that you're interested in, that you perceive as something that you need or that you want to affiliate with, it's not going to matter. And our brands, what has evolved is the volume of what we can consume. In the old days, in the hunter-gatherer days, it would have been easy because you scan, and if you're looking for food, it's the apple tree with the red apples in it, and you know that, okay, I'm going to go pick some apples. Today, it's become 100 million websites that you need to scroll through, and endless social feed, but you still need to find what you're looking for. And brands need to understand that just finding a purpose that resonates might not be enough. You actually have to find a purpose that resonates with the audience that you want to convince. And that's a little bit harder. There's a little bit more detail into actually unpacking it that way. There's a lot of easy ways to do it. I mean, the world's changed. It's very easy to actually get consumer insights extracted. Data is more freely available on consumers than what it's ever been. You can get retail data. You can get platforms like GWI where you can extract in-depth data on audiences and understanding your customer. But the key is never try to find your purpose, build your relevance without first really understanding who your customer is and what matters to them. Because if you don't, there's no way for you to purposefully hit the relevant segment. right? I hope that's making sense. But to me, it's such
Yeah.
a big difference between how a lot of people approach it versus how the guys who really understand brand development approach it.
Yeah. I mean, I think
If you miss that little disconnect, yeah.
The only disconnect would be is if you were a hunter and brought me back an apple, I'd be really disappointed in you. I mean, as opposed to like a slab of meat. Okay, so just make sure you're
Yeah.
hunting
I want
the
a
right
bison.
things. Okay, I want a bison. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But also, I think you're touching on something that's we talk about this a lot too. There's sort of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Psychological, safety, social esteem, self-actualization. There's a lot of things in there that builds on that hunter-gatherer mentality. Is like we need basic things like water, shelter, bare necessities for human survival. From a safety, we want to feel safe. We like to feel that we got making money, we've got structure, we've got a home to live in or a place to stay. We want intimacy and friendship socially, right? We want to have a sense of belonging. There's this esteem of dignity, respect, and achievement, purpose that we have as individuals and we're looking for and seeking. And then ultimately, creation, beauty, unity, that self-actualization as individuals, that when we can find brands that meet those needs for us too, we kind of like feel like we found ourselves, right? That's why people connect to brands, is they meet all these other needs to where suddenly it's like, ooh, like a warm hug from a brand, right? So I think there is like at the core, right? You were talking about behavioral, psychological, and just general, things that we're innately that are in our systems and in our mindsets, right? So to change, to say that something new and something will change that is just not really possible, right? I think people reject some of those interactions in a big way because it's not their nature to feel that way. So I think definitely on the right track with that, as you were saying, Etienne. I think let's dive in a little further, Matt. How do we apply that, to brands, right? So,
Yeah, because I mean, a lot of what. Keep going.
No, you're good. I was just going to say I'm on there, like going back to the DNA side of things, right? You're talking about physical and human needs and desires being applied to an animate brand, right? Like something like this phone, like how do you apply those things to those items? And it's a very interesting and delicate process. And if you don't do it right, it can come across stiff, wrong, off. And that's where brands miss the mark. But when you do it right, and like Etienne's saying, use the data, use everything at your disposal to position it the proper way to that market, then you win. 100% win. You got to hit on all cylinders.
Yeah, it's easy to see through the BS, right? It is, and a lot of what both of you are saying, we're taking this back to just very human, like raw needs, and tying in the emotional side of it. The next part that I'd like to get into a little bit is wrapping a personality around that. How do you get to the personality side of, cool, we understand what our purpose is. We've gone through a little bit of the position. Now, how do I wrap as a brand or a company? I'm starting to draw the line between these things. How do I then take that and say, what's the personality play that I put on this? And I'd love to talk a little bit too before we get into some of the examples that we've got to share here. But I'd like to get into a little bit of how do you keep that layer of truth applied to the brand long term? Because again, going back to the flash in the pan concept, I think what everyone's going to be looking for is, how do I then take this thing and make sure that it takes me off into the next, not just 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, 18 months, but into the next 3, 5, 6 years. Love to hear some perspective on that.
Etienne, you want to start?
Well, I hope I'm understanding the question correctly, but you're talking about so now that you've got your strategy sort of aligned, you found a purpose that makes sense to you, you've done a little bit of digging around your differentiation, so you've got an idea of where you're going to position yourself in the market. How do you now actually make it actionable? Am I understanding the question? So, yeah, I mean, and that's a great question. And what we use for it in MAG is we've obviously got a strong methodology to understand. We call it humanization of the brand, but we believe this idea of you need to break the brand strategy down so granularly that you can actually start thinking about it as a person, because that then enables you to action as if you were that person, right? It allows you to So we look at, again, it's obvious things that anyone knows about, but if you don't apply the execution filters to it, it's very difficult to understand exactly how it works. But you want to know, we go and we craft stories for it, we craft characters, we use psychometrics to actually go and identify behavior attributes of this specific brand if it was a person, and you write different messaging sort of applications for different scenarios, and you really go into a lot of effort to go and unpack, all right, if this brand was a person, we now know what it believes in, we know what its value system is, we understand it's how it thinks, how it reacts, and then you go and apply its own voice, right?
Yeah.
And then that gives you a lot of clues on how to make it real and how to make it actionable. And then you write guidelines for it, basically. You write a roadmap for whoever the team is that's going to be executing for that brand, whether it's the marketing team, the PR team, anyone who's going to be a real life voice for it needs to have a solid understanding of what that brand is.
Yeah.
And I hate going back to purpose all the time, but that's also where purpose really helps, because it becomes a guiding light. It's very easy to pull if you want to filter anything and question, am I on the right track? It's very easy to just go look back at your purpose. Does this align with a person who believes in this? Would he say this? Would he say it this way? And so it's really about humanizing it, if I can summarize that way, because that's what makes it actionable. That's how you take it from being a theory to being something you can go and implement and practice in real life.
And I've obviously seen this firsthand quite a bit, but that applies all the way down to who are the right people to hire into your organization. If you have someone on the sales team, 100%. If you have someone on customer service, what are the attributes that you look for in those people before they even come into your company? Because you want to continually promote that brand DNA, promote the attributes, promote the purpose, and get that all the way down into the deep core of your company, right?
Has to be fully integrated. Yeah. 100%.
Think of that, again, that purpose is really like everyone has and we always talk about this too, right? We don't believe that it's just about brands. I think people are the same way. We as individuals have a personal, like, true north or a purpose in our lives, things that fulfill us and make us feel like we're heading, like we're validating ourselves and what we're doing every day, whatever that may be. It's really it's kind of like a collective unconscious that we have, right? We're all gravitating towards doing this something. We also subscribe to, when you figure out what your why is, or this like true north or your purpose in life, when we start to look at that, we have to define, sorry, I'm like a frog in my throat over here. We have to define that personality that they have as well, right? So you kind of know what the core of who you are is when you say, this is what we believe in our purpose. But there's certain ways that they can achieve that by what we call personas as a business. So when we go through the branding process, we go through to define these true north of the why, how, what's of the world. And the next thing we kind of get into is we really want to get into what they value, what they care about the most, and really what they're all about. What are they trying to achieve in life? And we subscribe, again, a lot of people do, but there's the Carl Jung or the Jungian theory around archetypes. Those are base level archetypes that we use to help define who these people are. There's a great book right here, The Hero and the Outlaw. So I want to check that out, but it's about building extraordinary brands through the power of archetypes. But we use it as a baseline to like help you understand the psychology. It's like a rooted psychology in who this brand is and how we speak and do everything that we do. And it kind of pulls through into, what do we message? How do we message? What do we care about? How do we do these things? There's brands that are like the explorer or the hero. There's brands that are the lover, and there's sub archetypes there too. But a lot of times what we'll do is we'll take those, we have these lanes, and then we create a specific brand, call it a brand persona for a brand that's theirs to own. So it's based off of that archetype, but it might be the modern gaucho, which is based in the explorer archetype. But it just kind of helps to sort of like contextualize it towards them directly and then tell the story of how we do things. But in order to build your brand narrative and story about how we want to have conversations with our customers and our potential audiences, you need to understand who you are. You can't just again, it goes back to, if you don't have your purpose and you don't know who you are, how are you going to speak to someone else about what you are, what you do, what you care about, why you built this product, why you sell this thing? You can't. You're going to be running around in circles trying to explain this thing doing. And that's where confusion and chaos comes from, right? The simplicity of when someone knows who they are and what they're all about, it's very easy to speak to them and understand where they come from and understand what they
And
believe
act.
in and act on it. Yeah. Again, if we can't, we always like to say, like, if we can't help you build that brand, that personality around who you are, then it's really not going to go any further than that, right? It's a shallow brand, right? And when you build the depth of personality like we're trying to do with these, it's a lot of work. I mean, Etienne, we spend sometimes a month or two on these things, depending on how long the project is or how big it is. But
to find that
it's
perfect spot,
it's so critical. But once you get it, you have something to lean on for the rest of your brand, life, right? And I think that we see that a lot of times. There's brands, like a couple of examples. So Aviva is a brand that we worked with, software brand. They originally were Wonderware, Schneider Electric out of Orange County, California. They were basically just trying to reinvent themselves, and they had kind of forgotten who they were, right? They had lost their identity somewhere in the mix, and it had been 30 years. So it made sense. So we were working to rebrand them. And then eventually they merged with another company. We took this whole thing and we built out this persona around who they were, where they were going. I mean, this is a story. This is billions of dollars worth of software companies all combined into one, right? One of I think the third largest software company in the world. And the fact that they didn't really know who they were at the time was amazing. But we were able to kind of really focus them in and help them guide them to where they're at. And now they're out there still crushing it and doing what they're doing. And they really do still live on the principles that we put in place for them. And another one would be like a Vizio story. And then Etienne, I'll give you opportunity to talk a couple examples as well. But so Vizio, we started out with them really early on. Vizio TVs, they weren't anything at the time. They came out of the Gateway computer days, became a TV brand. William, the owner, decided, hey, Gateway went away from TVs. They wanted to build TV. They wanted to build TVs on their own. So Vizio became real, and we worked with them to help develop Vizio over the years in the trenches, like launching when social media was launching, like Twitter hadn't even come. I mean, everything was just happening along the way. But the reality is we really focused in on, and I think even at the time we were still kind of getting our minds around a lot of what we've learned over the years, because this was pretty early on. This is like back in like year 2, year 3 of our existence, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we were still formulating our opinion on this, what we're doing now. 20 years later, we look back and go, man, this is why we did all this stuff now. And the learnings we took from that, the ups and downs, really helped us to build the company that we are today and know what works and doesn't work. But I mean, Vizio, a great example of a company that, started out doing $3 million in sales and now just sold to Walmart for $3.2 billion. So when you do something right, good things can happen. Let's just put it that way. So
I want to take a quick page from Dave's book and use an analogy that I've just found people resonate with
analogies
easily. I'm not as good as you, Dave, with unpacking analogies, but let me give it a stab. But a key success behind a good movie or a good like series of movies is character development, right? So everyone gets that easily. It makes common sense. Like a really strong character in a movie is what it pulls people in. It makes you want to learn more. And it doesn't even matter whether it's the villain, whether it's the hero. A strong character development, and the reason why it's so critical, and this is the part that I think everyone needs to really get their heads around when you talk about brand building, is because it allows the actor to really execute that persona. That's why character development is so important. So he knows how he has to act, and it then allows him the creative freedom to really get into it and really go after it and sort of tell that story and pull people in. And that's the same with regards to building a brand. You need to get really good with character development. And again, you now there's a lot of nuance that goes with what you need to understand, the questions you need to ask. That's why those questions that we mentioned earlier of relevance, differentiation, and ownability is so important, because it doesn't help that you develop a character that you would never be able to execute successfully. You have to be realistic about what you can do and what you're capable of. You have to be realistic with regards to the audience, like would they even care? And then very, very importantly is you have to find a way that to still stand out. Like you need to, if the character is going to be the most boring plain character, no one's going to get pulled into it. So you need to build in elements into your character that makes that character unique and stand out and talkable and relatable, all of those things at the same time. So it's complex to do it, but when you do it well, that's a blockbuster. right? And it's a key ingredient to a blockbuster movie. So I think that's a cool analogy that people can understand for building out brands. How did I
For
do,
sure.
Dave? Ooh,
Great.
both Daves.
Sorry
How
if
did I do?
you lost me for a second there. I think you did good. You did good. No, you're right. I love
Okay.
it. Listen, I think we're onto some really interesting topics for sure with this. And again, sometimes people don't think, if they don't think about things like this, it's like, whoa, wait, you're talking about humanizing something like a microphone or a coffee, like, but it's something once you get your head and wrap around it, it's really important to the future of your company.
Yeah, I think way too often there's the misconception that branding is a logo and a color palette and a font choice, and we see that a lot, and we all obviously cringe. We've been doing this for a long time, and we put our hearts and souls into it. It's what we care deeply about in the world, and there's so much more to it. And I love that we're able to get the chance to really unpack some of the deeper meanings of branding and how that can impact fundamental business success on small stages, on big stages. I mean, the two examples that you just went through, Dave, with Viva and Vizio. I mean, those are companies that literally went from multi-million-dollar revenue lines up to multi-billion-dollar acquisitions. And while there's a lot that plays into that, I think the core of the brand and the heart and soul of the company is the thing that enables them to pull through that test of time that we've talked about. So it's really cool. Really appreciate you guys taking the time today.
I was going to say one more thing. I think on that point, Etienne, I know you wanted to talk a little bit about this, but like Next Grill is a good example. They're a grill company, right? And when we first met them, I want to come back. This is like the last little one I'll share about, because it's such a real story about exactly this coming to life, right? It's when you realize that a brand that has been around and they're in Home Depot and they're doing really good in sales or doing decent, but they basically were a product company selling a product, right? There's no like connection to it. It's just a piece of steel that has fire in it, and we basically came in and said, man, you have such great stuff. Like, how do you need to turn this into a brand though? Something that people like can connect to. And at the time, Traeger was coming out, things, other brands were coming into the market and they were doing it really well. But transitioning them from a product brand to a brand that actually is a household name or something that you can remember and it believes in something and cares about something, the effects of that into the business for them, into the market with the consumers, the change of perception. And this is really what it comes down to. Perception is reality. If we don't have a good perception of our brand in market, then you're not going to have a good reality. The reality is if you're not a brand, I don't think I'm going to pay more for you. If you're not a brand, I don't know if I'm going to consider you as a potential purchase, right? But Nextgrill and Megamaster, their other co-brand, we saw a change in people's perception of the brand, which resulted in a change in sales, right? Almost doubling their sales of sorts. We saw a lot of good movement. And again, more importantly, that deriving perception helped open up a lot of doors for them that didn't have before. So there's a big difference between a product and a brand. I want to be clear on that. That is a very, very distinct difference.
I want to add on to that, Dave, because there's so many people, again, that think having a good product is enough. And it might be enough for a short period of time, but you have to be realistic about it. If you've got a great product, you're a commodity. Because if you really think that the retailer who's selling your product or the distributor who's distributing your product is loyal to you because of who you are or because of your product, I think it's a little bit naive. You have to realize that if he can find a better price or a better product at the same price, he's going to go for that. So as long as you don't have a brand, and Andre actually tells the story beautifully. Andre's the CEO of Nextgrill. We've done a cool little video recording on him, which we can maybe share with this podcast later. But he tells the story beautifully. But when you're only product focused, your value is connected to your price and your price point, and your price point will always be under pressure. You'll be exploited for spending more on marketing and using people's other brands, like in Home Depot's brand as an example, or you have to pay other people to stay relevant and to stay out there. Whereas if you build a brand, suddenly you start owning a lot of that. You alleviate the risk, if I can put it that way, because now it's easier to jump geographically. It's easier to open up new categories. It's easier to negotiate price point. It's even easier to migrate into different pricing segments within retail. it siphons margins, which is a big deal when you're especially when you're a consumer goods sort of type of company, and it really reduces risk for almost all growth, because a big part of building brand is building audience and building following and having healthy engagement and all those tactics that we drive on an ongoing basis, right? But you need to realize the actual equity value of that, because now a brand that's so, if I can use Nextdoor as an example, the difference between launching a new product when you're not a brand, exceptional high risk, no footprint to start on, no fan base or loyal engagement to actually help you bring it to market, and the retailers also sort of question everything new that you bring to the market because there's no real trust in the brand's ability to promote. Fast forward, 5 years or 8 years, really established brands, one of the strongest brands in the US market at the moment, completely dominating the South African market via the MegaMaster brand. And now you have a massive footprint that you launch from. You have support from retail. You have sales through that you can push into retail. You have customers hundreds of thousands of people that you've built as loyal fans to the company who are interested in what you're saying and what you're bringing to the market. Different ball game, completely different ball game when you think about growing and scaling a company. So I love that story because we've lived it and we've been part of that transition over years, and we've seen the conversation change from fighting for a spot on the floor to being asked to move into to jump price category. Like that changes your world if you're in business. Yeah.
On the other side of that, also carrying through after the brand was built and they started seeing success, what do we always say? Like, the brand also defines the decisions you make as a business. It also made NextGrill look at their products differently, create better products, use better, materials, make them, it wasn't just about creating products anymore. They realized they had something to defend, you know what I mean? And that changed the way that they built their products. And again, that was a sore spot in the beginning. There was a lot of, sort of negativity around products and quality. That's all been changing over the years because they built a brand that lives and breathes through how they even develop their products. That's what I love when I see it happen well, right? It's just so interwoven into the company now that's how they build their products. That's how they handle their business. Boom. That's exactly what we're looking about. And I know, Matt, we're at the end of this segment. This is like
they found their purpose, right?
Yeah, they did. This is chapter one of so much. We're like barely even tapped the surface of like, this is about getting yourself ready to be a brand and becoming a brand. Things that we still need to cover and I'd love to dive into later at another time would be, now how do you take it to market? What's your go-to-market strategy? How do you reach your customers? Do you have customer personas? How do you define those? Where do you reach them? What kind of messaging do you create? What kind of content do you create? Boom. We're just tapping the surface. But if you think that brands do well because they just suddenly became successful because of luck, you are wrong. These are all very well planned, thought out, articulated, and basically master planned brands. These don't happen just by luck or by chance. This is why we exist and why we do what we do. But when you do it right, you see success, and when you don't, you wonder why. So I'm just telling you that this is something that is very intricate.
If you don't do this properly, you're gambling. Yeah.
You're gambling. Yeah. And we don't like to gamble with anybody's money. And I know I wouldn't do it on my own. I would do what we're doing for our own brands that we're building. And so I think that's how important it is. But like I said, I think we'll call this chapter one, Matt, and we'll have to jump on another one to talk more about that. But yeah, thanks for
no, it gets me fired up for sure.
Oh man. Yeah. This is why.
Yeah. So before we jump off here, I want to make sure we take a chance because Etienne, you've got kind of a cool masterclass opportunity that you're going to be putting together locally for the African region, talking through exactly what we've talked through today, right? I want to give you a chance to pub that for just a second.
Yeah, I think it's something we're working quite hard on. So we're going to be taking the fundamentals of brand strategy, and we're actually going to be building out a masterclass for other brand strategists, marketing managers. I even think some agencies could benefit from having a solid foundation and really understanding the approach to building brands. We're going to be talking about the fundamentals like what we just discussed, but we're actually going to be going into quite a bit of depth of why each of those pillars are necessary, and we actually help the guys with tools and the approach, where to harvest for the right types of information, what filters to apply. So I think at the end of the masterclass, the guys will really have a solid understanding of how to approach it maturely and responsibly, if that makes sense. I don't know exactly how long the session's going to be yet at this stage, but we are working on it, and we're trying to put something out there that's going to be of quite a bit of value. I can't say with too much confidence where it's going to be published at this stage. I know that the guys from the Lacquer Network are keen to publish it, and we'll probably publish it on our own platforms as well. So keep an eye out. I think it's going to be a valuable piece once it's out for anyone keen on understanding more about brand, more about strategy, more about how to. It doesn't even matter if you don't want to use us as an agency. I mean, I would even say, even if you don't, especially go and look at it, because it's going to give you some good guidance and a good understanding of how to either just make slight adjustments and improve on what your brand is or needs to be. And very important, if you're planning on launching something new or taking something new to market or evolving a bigger business, I think it's key to at least understand this before you take on the challenge.
Yeah, that's a great
for sure.
point to finish on, Etienne, is that idea that whether you work with us on this or not, this is like how you build houses. Like, build them how you want it, but these are the steps to make sure you do it right, and make sure that you do that very well, or you're not going to end up good. And I just don't understand what the paint lacquer has anything to do with anything, but the Lacquer Network, is that where you learn how to lacquer things? Like,
the Lacquer Network.
Lacquer.
Most people probably won't understand.
Yeah,
the
what does that
Lacquer
mean?
Network.
Come on. For us US, people over here, what does that mean?
Oh my goodness, how do I explain? It is probably the most common word in the South African country. It's that one word that descends cultural barriers, that descends language barriers. I mean, South Africa's got 11 official languages, right? Or maybe 12. I hope I'm not getting this wrong. And there's no language in this country that doesn't understand the word lacquer. And it is a hype word. So it could mean the same as like awesome, or I mean, that's great. It could have that sentiment, but it's also a taste describer. So it also implies this tastes good. And it's just a way of, it's a very standard feedback when you're very happy with what's happening at the moment. It's just the word lacquer. Dave, it's how you would describe those ribs I brought for you out here in South Africa. Right. So it's very much, yeah, there you go. So it's very much that. And there's a guy, Nick Latouf, I met him recently, who started up this network, and I love the initiative behind it, because he's basically saying there's so many South Africans entrepreneurs spread across the entire globe. And he's just established this network, which is the Lacquer Network, which the masterclass will be published on, with the sole purpose of connecting entrepreneurs across the globe, who are from South Africa but who are now spread to wherever they are in the world, to start having conversations and sort of, it's quite a niche network, but it's something that's pretty cool, and I support what the guy's doing. It's exciting.
Very cool.
Awesome. Well, good stuff.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Gentlemen, I super appreciate the time. Always love chatting with you guys. This gets me so fired up. I hope there's some value captured by the people that are listening here today. We'll have the show up pretty soon. It'll be out on Spotify podcasts, Apple Podcasts. We'll have it linked up in our YouTube and on our website. So wherever you consume the podcast info, hit it there. Give us a follow. We're always looking for feedback and opportunities for new talks. So if anybody's got any ideas for future topics, please reach out. Appreciate you both, and I'll look forward to hitting chapter 2 on this real soon.
Thanks, Matty. Cheers, DK. See
Cheers,
you guys
boys.
soon.
All right, take care.
Cheers. Bye.